If you like your science fiction less about explosions and FTL drives and more about ideas that rearrange your brain, we need to talk about Ted Chiang. Because Stories of Your Life and Others isn't just a great collection, it's a masterclass in what short form science fiction can do. Hello, BookTube! Today I want to talk about perhaps my favorite contemporary science fiction writer, Ted Chiang. Although he hasn't even written any novels. He's written one novella and he's got two short story collections. But I'm partial to science fiction short stories. I believe that the short story is the heart and soul of science fiction literature. It was through the short story that science fiction came of age in the old magazines like Amazing and Astounding Stories. And it was with short stories that I came of age in the 60s and the 70s through magazines such as Galaxy, Analog, FNSF, the magazine of fantasy and science fiction. And then later on in the 70s through Asimov's science fiction magazine and Omni, even, which was a, a monthly magazine that had nonfiction articles too. But at the beginning, anyways, published four short stories in each issue. Now, Ted Chiang is famously selective in his writing and publishing. Like I said, he doesn't write novels. He publishes slowly. And yet, almost everything he writes is an award winner or at least widely anthologized. And that's because Chiang doesn't start with plot. He starts with an idea. He starts with a question, usually philosophical, sometimes theological, sometimes linguistic. And then he builds a story to test that question as rigorously as possible. One of my favorite stories in this book is Understand. At first glance, it's a story about enhanced intelligence. A man who has suffered brain damage due to lack of oxygen is given a medical treatment with injections of hormone K, which has a side effect of supercharging the intellect. In fact, it sends his intellectual capabilities just skyrocketing beyond imagination. Okay, it's not really beyond imagination, as Ted Chiang literally imagined it. But very quickly, it becomes a story about isolation. As the narrator's intellect expands, his connection to other people begins to erode, and his quest is to just learn more just for the sake of learning more. And then one day he discovers that there is another person like him with the super intellect, and it seems they both have, uh, opposing endpoints where what they want to do with their intellectual abilities. And I won't go any further into the plot to spoil it, but this was, like I said, this was one of my favorite stories where the tension is not action based. It's just all conceptual. It's all about the ideas, and that's what makes it unsettling, really, at the end. Because at the end, I don't think this is a spoiler, really, but at the end, you find out that even your own thoughts can be dangerous to yourself. Another story in here that I liked was the story of your life, which was the basis of the film Arrival, which I seem to be the only person not to have seen. But from what I've read in reviews, it seems that the original story is, of course, they always add things to films, but they they have to liven it up. So I hear that the story was a little quieter, more intimate, and actually more devastating in its uh, the effect on the reader. Framed through the work of a linguist, the story explores how language shapes thought and how that in turn reshapes our experience of time and choice. Rather than asking, rather than asking if we can change the future, Chang asks whether our knowing the shape and the direction of a life will alter its meaning and our own life choices. The story is precise, emotionally restrained, and haunting. There were two other stories, Division by Zero and Tower of Babylon, which were also excellent, though I'm not going to spend a lot of time describing them because just by nature, a short story doesn't have a lot to tell about it without giving too much away. But like I said, those two were also excellent. And that's not to say every story in the book was, uh, hit a home run with me. Like any author collection or anthology, there's going to be some hits and some misses. The thing is with Ted Chiang, even the stories that didn't land very solidly at all with me, for instance, 72 Letters and Hell is the Absence of God, I still respected his ideas and admired his work in expressing them in the story. And who knows, perhaps, in the future, I'll have a different mindset where I can reread that and, appreciate them uh, more than I did this time. And these are stories that are worth rereading. Now, I'd like to address one issue that I keep reading in the reviews, and that's that Chang he's weak in characterization. But I think that just misunderstands, what he's doing. These are short stories. In these stories, the ideas are the main characters, and the humans in the story, their characters are developed as much as they need to be to drive the story forward, to express the ideas, no more, no less. The stories are not psychological portraits, they're philosophical pressure tests. He's taking an idea and just pushing it to the limit. Although I think that Division by Zero had some nice psychological depth to the human characters. I mean, you saw how this uh, mathematical proof was literally driving this one character crazy. So I think that padding these stories with extra verbiage just for the sake of adding, uh, more character depth would only weaken their impact. This book is for you if you like idea-driven science fiction. This book is for you if you like stories that reward reflection and if you're comfortable with narratives that prioritize meaning over momentum. If you like it when you finish a story and you have to take a moment or two to mull over what you've just read, these stories are for you. On the other hand, if you need fast pacing, heavy action, or melodramatic character arcs, this may not be your book. Ted Chiang assumes readers' patience and rewards it. Stories of Your Life and Others isn't about predicting the future. It's about questioning the assumptions we already live by. And that's why even when a story doesn't fully land for me, the collection as a whole remains one of the most thoughtful works of science fiction I've read. And that goes back to the beginning where I, declared him my favorite, current author because reading so much science fiction over these past years, it hasn't held the same wonder and enchantment that it did back in my formative years, back in the 60s and the 70s. And I figured those days must be long gone. I just chalked it up to youthfulness and being easily impressed. Well, now it's 50 years later, and I'm easily impressed by what Ted Chiang is writing, and I'm truly interested in hearing what he has to say and what he has to write about. And so next I will go on to his next collection, Exhalations. and I eagerly anticipate reading that. And I'll be back with another video to tell you my impressions of it. So until then, this is Ted. Thank you for joining me, and I will see you next time. Happy reading.